My name is GOODMAN MANYANYA Phiri. This is about, it's actually one of about 3 videos I'm doing about my life story. And with me here is my daughter Tamara. Hey, Tamara Sibusisiwe Phiri, who is 16 months old. Trouble someone. Hey, I think you must go now. Okay, I'm sitting here in Mamelodi.
Baba.
Yes, Baba. That's how I'm telling you. Hey, I'm going to come here, please. Okay, bye bye. Bye bye. Okay, bye bye. Today the date is the 12th of January, the year 2012. A very fateful, if you like, day for me. Exactly a month ago, the 12th of December 2011, Mr. Jacob Zuma, who happens to occupy the highest office in the land of the Republic of South Africa, you know, a constitutional democracy, you know, charged me for one reason and one reason only, for reporting to him corruption that was done 11 years ago at the security department where I'm working. The corruption was, you know, spearheaded by a cousin, self-professed cousin of Mr. Nelson Mandela, whom Mr. Zuma will frequently called the father of the nation. I think people have got the freedom of opinion. I don't think he's the father, but that's how he's called. But it so happens that because I blogged, I wrote letters to both President Mr. Zuma and the predecessor, and they ignored me because apparently relatives of Mr. Mandela are untouchables. You dare not report about them. So I decided to talk publicly about the matter. So I've got a charge now. I've got about 3 charges, if not 2, confirmed by one Mr. Norman Yengeni. You know, he's a fellow tribesman to the woman or to Mr. Mandela. So it's about the Eastern Cape. Shortly, Mr. Zuma now, as confirmed by Mr. Yengeni, gave a full power to the minister concerned, whom I may not mention because there's an order from a Judge Webster of the Supreme Court, the High Court of Pretoria North, that I may not talk about the particular department, but that is that. Department is not important anymore because now the true colors of Mrs. Zuma have come out. That is December 2011. Around March, that is about December to March, what do we have? About 9 months earlier, Mr. Zuma, now it's clear that he was behind it, sent 6 armed soldiers to my house in Lilton to come and you know, raid me, heavily armed guys. I do happen to be an employee of the state. I'm a civil servant, and I'm neither a fugitive nor a dangerous criminal. I just have good ideas that corruption must stop in South Africa, whether committed by relatives of Mr. Nelson Mandela or by ordinary people. We cannot have apartheid after apartheid was destroyed in 1994. But that's a crime to Mr. Zuma apparently. So they sent those guys to come and raid me. I think they were actually sent there to come and kill me. That's my life. So I was thinking that one of these good days I'll be a dead man. Or I might end up, you know, sitting in prison for a long time for something I never committed. So I thought maybe let me talk my life story. Who am I? Who is GOODMAN MANYANYA Phiri? So I'll try to be brief. It's a complicated life, but it's my life. I must accept it, complications or not. Paternally, I'm Phiri, Matanje, Wampuno, Gadunyungu. My ancestors come from present-day KwaZulu-Natal, areas like Kwamhlabya Lingana, where you have got Baroka or Amatonga, who are Zulu speaking. I learned in history as well as from the family history that Matanje was, Matanje Phiri was one of the ancient kings of what we call the ancient Azania or Zion. Because you might know that King David or Solomon, one of the 2 holy kings, named a city in Palestine or somewhere there as Zion, it came from the origins of the Jews. The Jews come from, like anybody else in the world, from South Africa. So about 250,000 years ago, there was civilization already here in South Africa, the oldest civilization in the world. And so that's where Azania was, or Zion. So the PHIRI'S, probably the oldest clan name in the whole world. You will find it among whites, so-called whites, Europeans, or whatever other so-called racial groups. You have PHIRI'S. They'll be spelled differently, different of course. So that's where I come from. So Matanje, then with the rise of guys like Zwide, very recently now, around the 18th and 19th centuries, the Matanje were wiped out. Our kingdom was destroyed, even though PHIRI ruled the entirety of Southern Africa from the Stone Age. We were an ancient, clan name. With the rise of Shaka, then, one of my ancestors called Pikamalaza PHIRI found himself leaving the country as the commander of the forces of Zwangedama. They crossed Zambia, they went into, they crossed Zimbabwe, they went across Mozambique, went as far as Zambia. You'll find even a place called Pikamalaza. That's my ancestor. So that is the Matanje. They were resisting the rise of Shaka, but I'm happy with Shaka. I think Shaka wanted to unite Africa, but I'm talking about those issues in other videos. Then Pikamalaza's son was Maziri Nkunda. Those people were now part of the Tumbuka ethnicity of the Malawians. The Tumbukas principally, if not just largely, formed of former refugees from both Southern Africa and Western Africa countries like Cameroon during different centuries. So that's where we ended up being, but from being what you could call Zulu or pre-Zulu, we ended up being Tumbukas. So Maziri Nkunda is born by Pikamalaza. Pikamalaza gives birth to Maziri Nkunda. Maziri Nkunda gives birth to Jacob PHIRI. Jacob father's bride around the year 1919. Bride is my father. So that's a brief history. Maternally, I'm a Mavimbela. These are Swazi people well trusted in the royal house of the Swazi kingdom. I don't want to dwell a lot. I've talked a lot about the Mavimbelas in other videos. But what is of more interest, and I found a lot of succor and support from, is the fact that my mother, being fathered by Mr. Mavimbela, we actually came from Swaziland. My mother was actually the first generation of the Mavimbelas to be born in South Africa. Married between, if you like, two wives. One Ula Shabangu from the Shabangu clan, and he also married from the Dlamini clan, who are the royal house of Swaziland. So my grandmother, who's actually the woman who brought me up, her name is Elina Mafete Ngosi Dlamini Wekunene. I still love that woman. She's no more, but that's the woman who brought me up. She's also the woman who taught me a lot about the African National Congress, my cultural home, because that's where I grew up. And that's probably the reason why people like Jacobs want to destroy me, because I have knowledge of an organization. Some of them are co-running, they don't know anything about, they think it's a property to be used for neo-colonialism. Don't want to dwell there too much, I just want to give my background. So I'm born 1961, May the 4th, at a place called the Brook. You find the place on the road to Swaziland, towards Ngwenya or Oswood Brigade. So around the age of 6 and 7, my grandmother, the princess, who by the way is the daughter of Princess Kayeza. Princess Kayeza is the younger brother to Prince Folozi Ngosi Dlamini. Folozi is the grandfather to Father Smarto Mkavi. Some of you might know he's one of the prominent members of the African National Congress. He is a relative to me in that sense. So Kayeza and Folozi are fathered by Prince Kengana, and Prince Kengana fathered by the man who is viewed as maybe the father of Swaziland, or the Swazi kingdom as you know it today. aka Somhlolo, or Sompoza the First. So if you take me from that side, then I'm related to the royal people. So my culture is Swazi, because I never lived in Malawi. I was born and bred in South Africa. That's why you find me when I'm at home, this is how I'm dressed. I'm with my grandmother around the age of 6 and 7, and she lived in a place called Lake Crazy as well as in a place called Luther. So I grew up there, and I hear bits while I'm still young. You don't quite, you know, connect things. But as time went on, and I recall around the year 1972, I was 11. My grandmother, you know, if you like, I got to understand better about the history of the Swazi people, about the culture, about the unmatched contribution of the Swazi royal house to the founding of the African National Congress, which we today have entrusted to Mr. Jacob Zuma, the very same person who now wants to abuse his power in the ANC to victimize people along tribal lines, because we may not talk against relatives of his friend Nelson Mandela while committing, you know, corruption. I'm talking here, not all relatives of Mandela are that bad. I'm talking about a self-professed cousin of Mandela called Tobizoda Zinibobelo, or Tobizoda Bobelo Zini, who got generalcy in a security department, I may not mention as a Judge Webster, through adultery with one guy called, that's the year 2000, Decemberish, with one guy called also an officer there. You know, officership is cheap in South Africa. Anyway, called Raymond Atulangling. So I'm being victimized by Mr. Zuma for that. But I thought I must just tell you about the background. So around the year 72, I'm with my grandmother still. Prior to that, I was with her from the age 6, 7. I remember around 1968, I was with my granny and my aunt called Pelamnis. There's another video I'm doing about pictures of my family. So I was not living at home because for some reason my grandmother, you know, liked me a lot. I'm grateful for that because I learned a lot from him. 79-ish, correction, 1969, I end up later on, my father, you know, reclaims his son, Mr. Bright Phiri. So I end up schooling at a place called Tuyepoort, the Afrikaans, Kanoke Big Afrikaans Brand. Tuyepoort in Mpumalanga, next to Amsterdam. So that's where I kind of repeated my grade 1, or rather my grade 1. We used to call it sub A. So the year 1975, me with my father again. He was a timber logger, Mr. Bright, also called a lumberjack. So I'm still at Tuyepoort. 1970, 1971, we move house. We end up living on a farm called the Lions Glen, owned by one Mr. N. Jacob. November Jacob. There's a long story about that guy. His conflict with my father. I don't want to go there now, but that's where I grew up. I'm a farm boy, okay? Call me Johnny Come Lately if you like, in the town, but that's my background. The year 71, I'm at a school called Kamsheng. You know, we used to walk distances or, you know, ride bicycles with my siblings. You know, if I were to go to my siblings, I'll spend a lot of time on this video. Maybe I'll do another video with my siblings. I'm about the 4th born, if not the 5th born in my family. So I don't want to go there, but my siblings were schooling together with them. Particularly an elder brother of mine, 3 years my senior, one Jackson. He's now late. Jackson Vusmuzi Peer. 72, my father decided, because he worked from a station called Luther, it is next to Emelo, that I should do further schooling next to him. So I end up returning actually to my grandmother's. Then I met a friend, one Mr. Trevor's one, childhood friend, who for some reason, which he actually, if you like, divulged to me later on. He said I struck him as an intelligent, a fellow student, and he wanted to know what's my secret. Too often, people don't understand how people succeed. They think there's a secret potion to success. So Mr. Zwane wanted to see how I succeeded at school. I tended to be always the first, to be the first one, ranked number 1 in my class, and he tended to be number 8. So he called me invited me rather to live with him in town. That's how I moved from my grandmother's. I ended up now staying in town, or resemblance of town, the Black Township of Lotero, a place we used to call Kamhlabanyon. There's a video somewhere I did about that. I might refer to that in the future. 1972, 3 and 4. Principaled at our school by one Mr. Twala and his wife. And then 75, my father decided I must go back to Amsterdam, where my elder brother was attending school then, Mr. Jackson. But 75 was a very important year in my life, because that's when now I started to make contact with members of the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania. By that time, organization like the PAC, which is the abbreviation for the name, and the ANC were banned organizations. So my brother was, dabbling or getting his fingers, involved, if you like. What's the right word? Involved with so-called terrorists. But I got to get to know those people. But I think there was a kind of I think the PAC knew a lot about our background. I don't know, but because they approached us, we were still young boys. Look, 1975, I was 14 and my brother was only 17, so we're young boys. But we ended up, getting used to, underground guerrillas and stuff like that. 1976, I ended up also, joining the armed wing of the Azanian People's Liberation Army, which is, the armed wing of the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania, which was the Azanian People's Liberation Army. That's how now, if I'm going to fast forward, I end up around the year, that was my last year, 1994, being a chief broadcaster and a deputy director, if you like, for broadcasting for the Azanian People's Liberation Army, and for the PAC, as well as APLA, the armed wing in Radio Tanzania, Dar es Salaam. So I'm just fast forwarding from the year 1976 or 75 to the year 1994. The long and short of it is I'm a school child, but I'm also, if you like, a child soldier. Fast forward again, from 76, I school, I get my matric, I even start teaching. At some point my father is being deported, because this thing of xenophobia is not new in South Africa, but it's only worse now under Mr. Mandela's dispensation. There was xenophobia started by the apartheid regime. So my father at some stage, 1981, was despite the fact that he came around 1914 in South Africa, and he is married to not one, my mother was not the only wife, to about 3 wives. They deported my father in 1981, but I was already working. After my matric, I worked. So I moved from my work, I went to support my father's business, the lumberjack. I took over the job. 82, I was doing the job, but I'm not a lumberjack by nature. I'm an educator. I think I am anyway. My father used to say when I was young that I cut the picture of a great teacher. I don't know. So I ended up being a teacher. So I cut off the work as a lumberjack. I went to full-scale teaching. And around about the year 1982, I was teaching at the primary school at the Gem. It's between Mayflower or Mpuluzi and Lotero. That's the place where my father used to work, and my place for schooling. And then 83, I moved to another school, Kutsala, where things came to a head. There was a principal there, one called Mr. Mklanga. Proof about this. Nobody can say I'm defaming any character. Who was molesting at least one school child, wanting to have sex with the child. So I ended up having a conflict with that principal. He was my principal. I was a junior teacher then, teaching grade 7, mathematics and I think English as well. So when I confronted my principal together with the complainant, my principal, called me names and started to assault me. Unbeknown to him, I'm into martial arts. I fight. I'm a fighter. I'm trained already by APLA. So during while I was parrying his blows at me, I think I hit the guy. He fell down, and I think for a couple of minutes he lost consciousness. There was a lot of fracas on the college. I don't want to dwell too much there, but the police came. The police made peace. The police understood who's the culprit, meaning the one who's molesting children sexually, and the inspectors came as well, and they forced me, despite my protest, to continue teaching at the same school. They called me the father of the children, even though I was only 22 years old. They said to Mr. Mhlang, who was about 40, how come you, the principal, you are married, you want to sleep with girls who are 15? Why isn't Mr. Phiri here, who is so junior, and not sleeping with the girls? So it was a big issue at Mayflower. You know, that's where my hometown is. But then APLA came and said I must leave for exile. My departure in exile was on the 11th of November 1983, because I was a security risk according to APLA, because the assault, I was told later, was too severe on the guy, and it bore telltale signs that I am trained, you know, for killing people, because that's the job of a soldier, either to kill or to be killed. Anyway, I left for exile, and that's how I met Mr. Jacob Zuma. So while I was in prison in Mozambique, because that's where I ended up, because I had no contact with APLA, he came for me. Mr. Zuma said, but why are you, you know, stuck with the PAC? We are not fighting organization, we are sister organizations, come with us. I had no problem. I grew up under the ANC culture. So I ended up in Angola then. In Angola I found that was the year 84, after 6 months in jail, Mashaba prison. It's a maximum prison. I don't think you find anything more maximal in terms of you know, prisoners in Mozambique even today, more than Mashaba. It's in Maputo. So I end up in 1984, around June 1984. I'm in Mozambique. One of the people who met me, and there's a video about it, the gentleman who was helping me get married to the mother to the little child you saw before, Misty. I did not call too much about the ranks, because he works for the department I may not mention, because Mr. Zuma, you know, used the minister to go and rush to judge web, so that my freedom of expression must be shut down, and they will not succeed. I will not mention the department, but the truth shall set me free. So Simon Sihoho Mabalane was the senior. He is the one now who recommends to Krisani, the comrade, the communist. You might know about him a lot. Very well known member of the ANC, was shot dead. He recommends that I must leave Angola then to help Solomon Mahlangu Freedom College in Tanzania, because I've got this background as a teacher or an educator. So I end up there. What brought me out of Angola was tribalism. I found that Mr. Oliver Tambo, the one who was heading the ANC there, was teaching people songs. I've done another video, I hope it's also online, where we were taught, you know, false history about South Africa by the regime of exile run by Mr. Oliver Tambo, who comes from the Eastern Cape. So there was tribalism. In fact, when I arrived in 84, there was a mutiny. They said that we were fighting about the tribalism going on there. So I ended up now, you know, being hurtful. That's the Africans way. That's, I don't want to have anything to do with it. I left that thing. I said, no. The ANC is my home, but if this is what you're doing in your camps, sorry guys. So 85, I'm in Dar es Salaam. I'm sent to a place called in Morogoro, and there I end up now being an adult educator under the organization they used to call it the Southern African Extension Unit. It involved the PAC, the ANC, SWAPO, and all other organizations prior where, you know, we're still fighting for their freedom. As soon as you got your freedom, you were of course removed from the list of that organization. Principally then, around 85, 6, 7, I found there's a lot of tribalism. There was a lot of rapes conducted by guys from the Eastern Cape with the support of the chief representative then of the ANC. They called one, he comes from the Eastern Cape. Who's this guy? By that time, Mr. Zuma is a security member, intelligence member of the ANC. He's one of the top people there. So all these things, Mr. Zuma knows what I'm talking about. That's why he wants to get me killed, I think. The other day, by the way, just to fast forward, around the beginning of January this year, 2012, my landlady here where I live, by the way, let me show you. Maybe the camera will show. This is my shack. This is where I live. For the past 11 years of exposing the corruption and my persecution by Mr. Zuma and his predecessors, both Mr. Mpegi and Mandela, for talking against tribalism, Eastern Cape tribalism. Not the entire Eastern Cape, but particularly where Mandela comes from and his relatives, or at least one relative, Bobeluzi. I've paid from my, I'm a senior civil servant in the security. I've paid R1 million out of my pocket. Mr. Zuma must pay that money back. I need that money back. Because there is a copy of a letter here from the public protector that says there's a policy. There's a policy that if you're a civil servant, like Mr. Zuma was when he was charged for corruption with Shabir Sheikh, that was the allegation. We paid as taxpayers in the region of 11 million. There's another guy called Jackie Sleb. We also paid millions there. But because Mr. Kwete Mantasha was told by some of the comrades who are my bosom friends of Kwete Sizwe, former, they tell me because I must become a member of the ANC first before I can get assistance from Jacob Zuma. Where is that coming from? I was not charged at work in the year 2001 being victimized for exposing Mandela's relative Bobeluzi because I was a member of the ANC. I was charged because I was a civil servant. So I've spent a lot of money. I've been kicked out of the place I was staying at my official residence at Littleton. I am now in Mamelodi, and here plainclothesmen are doing rounds here because I'm blogging about these problems. I must get killed. One day they'll come with petrol here and they'll pretend it's ordinary people. But I know Mr. Jacob Zuma has got a head, and if I should be dying, Zuma must answer for my death. If I should be going to jail, it's because he doesn't want to pay for legal fees in this 11-year-old struggle in the courts. One of my videos here will be talking about, I'll be addressing, I'll be trying to, I'll be addressing Chief Justice Muhwe to give a hand if he can. If he can't, I'll understand. I'll read this letter. Let me quickly read. It says, written, please quote this reference in your reply. 7/20425/10 dated 31st May 2010 is addressed to me by the Public Protector's office. It says Mr. GM Phiri, Golf Mike Phiri. Box number, dear sir, in regard to legal fees of the organization, I did not mention it because there's an order now. Mr. Zuma got that minister of his to stop me talking about them, the corruption that's going on there, that the minister, I may not mention, is condoning there. Your complaint has reference, it reads. I was complaining why they don't pay for me for the prosecution of my case, which is at the Supreme Court right now, the High Court, even as high as the Concord. There's a case now I put with the Constitutional Court, but I can't prosecute it because I'm broke. I have no money. Hey, look guys, this is where I live. A former freedom fighter and a senior officer in the security of the Republic of South Africa. This is where I live because Mr. Zuma wants to get me killed, destroyed. He wants to see me committing suicide or something. He wants my children hungry. He wants my... I can't even finish mentioning what he calls. And he calls himself the defender of the Constitution. I don't think he deserves it. But that's by the way. Now the letter continues. Written by Advocate E. Cilliers, Echo Cilliers, a senior investigator, says, your complaint has reference. Kindly be advised that the Public Protector can, by law, be of assistance to you should it be established that you are being improperly prejudiced by a government official or institution. There's no further establishment. I'm finished. I'm sitting here. I want to move here. After you see this video, I'm going to come out. I'm going to see straight my lawyer. My lawyer, I'm owing Musa attorneys in the region of 30,000. I can't pay. I don't have money anymore because Mr. Zuma is bankrupting me. He's beggaring me because he's protecting prostitution done in the year 2000 by a Mandela cousin, because Mandela is Mr. Zuma's god. That's what it's all about. So the Public Protector doesn't need any other proof. What must I do to show that I've been beggared for exposing corruption? So, but that's what the letter says. It continues as a letter in terms of section 182(1)(a) of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, Act 1996. The Public Protector has the power as regulated by national legislation, to investigate any conduct in state affairs or in the public administration in any sphere of government that is alleged or suspected to be improper or to result in any impropriety or prejudice. Well, the public protector has got a job now. I hope they see this video. They must go to the Zuma's office, and there and this is proof. I'm being victimized. I want to talk about the minister who went to Judge Webster, whom I may not talk about. The minister, prior to approaching the public protector, I went to there's another chapter 9, we call them chapter 9 institution, close to the public protector, the Human Rights Commission. The minister was summoned there, the one I may not mention because Judge Webster will kill me. When they was summoned for about 2 years to appear there, she refuses. She's a daughter, by the way, the minister, to one of the people Mandela calls, you know, the father. Mandela calls others are fathers of the ANC. Zuma calls Mandela the father of the ANC. Who is the father of the ANC? Both Mandela and the so-called other father. Mandela was born in 1918. Okay? The other father was born around 1912. So how can a man who was born in 1912 or 1918 form an ANC, become a father of the ANC or of South Africa, when they were either not born or they were born the same year with the ANC? They are suppressing another man. I've done other videos about the founder of the ANC peace system. Their children are suffering like me. So there's the victimization tribalism that Mrs. Zuma is busy with here, and is only checking about his enemies. He can go and sue me for this, but the truth is the truth. Tribalism must be stopped in South Africa. Anyway, the letter from the public protector via Advocate Celias ends this way. I may not mention that organization again, has a policy in respect of the payment of legal fees for members of the force. I also know for a fact that they pay, especially if you are coming from the Eastern Cape. They pay for you if you've got this. If your matter is discussed by the department and it must go to the Supreme Court, they continue to pay. But with me, because I'm talking about Mandela's relatives, they are God, they have decided to kill me unfairly. Justice Mukhueng, if you watch this video, there's another one for you. You are my last appeal. But if I should be killed, I'm ready to die. I was ready to die when I was 15, when I joined the Liberation Movement. Then let Mr. Zuma kill me. Let him come and burn my ship. Because there are plainclothesmen who came here early January. My landlady told me that there are plainclothesmen. So I went underground to finish my story. That's why people are wondering what happened to me. I know they will charge me for you are not appearing. They might even do a lot of other ugly things, close my salary. I am ready for that. I'm ready for anything. I'm ready for jail. But I just want to tell my story before I'm locked up. Now the last line in Advocate Celias of the public protector, it says, this office, meaning the public protector's office, cannot recommend that the policy that they have, in other words, to support their members, should be disregarded. I want to quickly go back now to my days in exile there. When I was now 85, around 85 coming to Tanzania, I found a lot of tribalism. So I decided to leave the ANC then, because that's where it was. Where I thought so, that the ANC was the only Sikh organization there with tribalism of the Eastern Cape where Mandela comes from. So I went back to my home party. They were happy to see me, so they asked me, but that is the year 1987, I went to Dar es Salaam. So Mr. Mlambo, Johnson Mlambo, was the chairman of the PAC there. You know, there's the organizationally got me writing my biography. You know, once again, how I fared with the ANC. So I told this tribalism, and I'm sick and tired. You guys knew that I'm still there because we're in contact. I didn't hide the fact that I'm with the ANC, and they said stay there, but I said that I'm hurtful. That's the word I talked about earlier on. It's like this, I've had enough. So I wrote, so they asked me, and then I wrote openly what was it. Mr. Mlambo apparently is Tonga or Shangaan, if not Swazi. So apparently I don't have a problem to talk about Eastern Cape tribalism if you're talking to somebody who's running the organization who doesn't come from Eastern Cape. About 2 chairs later, or 2 watches later after Mlambo, there was another head of the PAC. who went by the name of Mlamli Makwetu, Clarence. Ooh, that's where my trouble started.
Perfect.
I'm already married to a Tanzanian. There's another video where I'm doing about my relatives. So Clarence Makwetu engineered that my wife, despite United Nations say so that they must come back. Hello, baby. Hey, close that tape. Close it. Tamaya. Tamaya. Tamaya.
Yeah.
No, Tamaya. Tamaya. Tamaya, man. Keep easy, man. Tamaya, please. Sorry about this, because that's the life I live here. Kids are disturbing me, so some of them are very hard of hearing. I'm sorry about that. So I was victimized. They took away my food. Even today, I've got 2 kids that Clarence Makwetu's ran off the PAC because the same tribalism of the Eastern Cape, Clarence Makwetu took off to revenge because I revealed his cousin, I'm told their cousin Mandela, that the ANC through Oliver Tambo was running. So I was victimized. So as a result, when I came to South Africa, I went to the TRC about it. If you read the TRC, there's a report here, I'm reading here, volume 2, chapter 4. Let's get the title of this book. Basically, the report, I think it was the preliminary report by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So they say here, where I went to report, they say, page 374, paragraph 211. The commission received statements from families of people who went missing in exile. Cases for which the PAC, of course under Makwetu, not the PAC under anybody, was allegedly responsible. Okay, full stop. They include the cases of, I want to jump and come to what matters. Mr. Goodman Manyanya Phiri, case number JB04241/01 GTSOW. Let me repeat this. Case number Juliet Bravo 04241/01 Golf Tango Sierra Oscar Whiskey. So I'm in the books of the TRC. But guess what? The compensation to get my Tanzania, my first wife came from Tanzania, who is called the Kwerekwere, by nobody else but so-called former liberation movements like Makwetu, not any PAC, the one under Makwetu. Yeah? And the ANC now under Mr. Zuma and Gwede Mantashe, who is still, because now I've got the father who is not South African. They don't want to treat me as a citizen. Please, Judge Mukhueng, your justice, come to my rescue. Where is our constitution when we do this? Now I'm told I must dance this way, I must dance to Gwede Mantashe, I must dance to Jacob Zuma. So in short, I'm trying to say, I've done everything. But the compensation that I must get, you know who's holding the money, the prices for it? Mr. Jacob Zuma. I've been going to the office asking all the officers, where is my compensation? How do I get my children from Tanzania? They want to destroy me. Whereas at my workplace, there is a cousin of Mandela who fornicates or commits adultery. Bobelozini. I've mentioned about it in other videos. So I must be destroyed for that. So that's I want to end my biography. I can talk about me till the cows come home. But I think that's sufficient. But otherwise, YouTube will not allow this thing to be loaded. If you want to ask a question quickly, it's fine. But otherwise, this way I want to end. I want to do another video quickly about my life. Thank you for listening. But that's me, and maybe just show around where I live. That's where I live now. A senior officer who's been serving the liberation movement from the year 1976. There's a certificate and everything about me, but I must be destroyed by Mr. Jacob Zuma because he wants to protect relatives, or at least one relative of Nelson Mandela who was committing, ill at the workplace. That's the end of my story for now. There are other videos. Please look forward to them. Thank you very much, please, my friends, for taking this. Okay, stop. In Kilaulo, 1 hour.